Don't be a Cavalier cowboy. Don't go out swinging and doing all this crazy, funky anesthesia because you think you're some hotshot badass, because you're not. Healthcare and medicine is probably, unequivocally, one of the most toxic, unsafe, unrealistic. People are so detached from reality in healthcare, they don't know how to talk to people.
I appreciate you coming on. This is great.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Such short notice too. That's surprising. I've been trying to schedule different CRNAs on here, and like with call schedule and stuff, it's really tough sometimes.
I was on call last night and I picked up some extra call. I'm going on vacation next week. So I was like, you know what, let me just kind of grind out a few shifts. And I totally forgot I was on call until they were like, oh yeah, you're on call tonight, right? I was like, I am?
Did you get to sleep at all? Or is this like a...
I did. So this was like my weekday call. So I did 12 hours in-house and then the rest of it I came home because I was first OR call.
Okay.
So it worked out well. I didn't get called in last night.
Oh, great. Where do you work?
I work for a private anesthesia group in Chicago.
Oh, nice.
So we staff two hospitals. Oh, cool. So
yeah,
first job out of school, just growing, learning, man.
Yeah, dude, that's awesome. Love it. I've been a CRNA for just over 5 years. I work here in Green Bay, Wisconsin, or it's a small town just outside of Green Bay. So how big is the hospital that you work in?
It's a community hospital. So I think around 500 beds, nice ICU, relatively busy OR, 11 ORs, OB unit. That's not crazy busy, but good enough to where you can still get your hands wet and, catch up on things and not feel like there's chaos all the time and you can't learn. It's not high risk OB. So it's pretty good, which is what I wanted for, first job.
Yeah, that's great. I know Chicago can be pretty heavily directed. Are you able to do everything and like keep your skills up, or are they pretty strict with that?
That was one of my big things when I was looking for the school that I went to. They're very military mindset. A lot of the faculty were ex-military, and even some of the adjunct professors that came were military, served in Afghanistan, and did tours and stuff. So it was all about, we know what we can do, and we want you to understand that. And when you finish, we want you to pretty much take ownership of your practice and practice to the full scope. And so that was just like every lecture we were taught, every simulation that we had, you had to own your anesthesia. And so, you go through that for 3 years, every single day, that kind of becomes your mindset. So I was graduating. That was one of my biggest priorities, was find somewhere where I'm able to practice with a full scope and extent of my license, but also to my knowledge base and my training and my capacity. And to the place that I'm at, I honestly, it's a blessing because we have such a great collaborative relationship with the physicians that we work with. It's a physician-owned group, so 3 physicians own the group, and there's more CRNAs than there are attendings, and the group is built around the fact that everyone is equal, and you are not superior to one another based on your credentials. And the way that they make that be a reality is how they allow you to practice your anesthesia. Like, it's every pet peeve that you can have as a CRNA, it's not there.
Oh, wow. There's not too many of those. So it sounds like you found a good one.
Yeah, man. I'll say less by saying just that. I've never had to tell someone, I got this. I'm going to push my own drugs. I'm going to do my own case. I'm going to blah, blah, blah. I do my own blocks, do my own cases, write my own orders, see my own patients, pre-op my own patients. So
my wife wanted me to move to Chicago right after school. That's one of the reasons I didn't go there, because there was so few of those to choose from.
I think the climate's changing. And I think people are starting to understand. Social media obviously plays a big role, and the political climate of anesthesia plays a big role. The ANA is here, ASA is here. AAs are now a contender in the market, and with locums and what has happened and the shortage of anesthesia, I think the language is pretty clear. Like, if not here, I'll go elsewhere. Fine, treat me like crap and I'll just make 2 or 3 times the more money and have no loyalty to anyone. So,
Yeah. So I was going to ask you your initial thoughts on the profession. You just made it pretty clear, but yeah, you're loving it so far. How long have you been practicing?
So I graduated in June. Actually, yeah, I'm brand new grad. So as fresh as it gets. I graduated in June, like the first week of June. I took boards like 8 or 9 days after that. And then by the time credentialing was, my first day was July 31st. And so we're going on 2 months of practice now. still relatively new. And so there's a lot of, just natural trepidation and apprehension about I'm new. There's a lot that I have read in books and theory, but then how they always tell you the art of anesthesia versus the science of anesthesia. And sometimes the science and art don't really converge. And you don't have the wisdom, that distinction, because you simply haven't done the reps. So I'm in a state where I'm doing the reps right now. And I'm reminding myself that I'm doing these reps. And sometimes you do half reps and partial reps, and sometimes you go to a failure, and it's like a workout, but it's been a blessing through and through. It's very exciting.
So we went through like your social media. It's kind of hard to be honest. I Googled your name, and it's a little bit hard to find info on you because there's a lot of Wali
Khan,
or how do you say
Wali Khan?
Yeah, it was like talking about all these like war heroes from the Middle East and stuff. And,
I know.
Okay, well, don't think this is the guy.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, kind of tell us about your background. Were you were born in Pakistan? Did I see that somewhere?
Yeah, I was definitely not a war hero of any kind. Not a hero. Never been to war. I was born in Pakistan, came to America at the age of 7. We came straight to New York. Actually, me and my family immigrated here. It was 2 years before 9/11. So the world was a good place when we came. And then 2 years after that, it wasn't such a good place. You went from being, welcomed into a country to being public enemy number 1. So things changed very drastically overnight. So and I was living in Brooklyn. That's where I was raised, Brooklyn, New York.
Were you in New York?
I was
on 9/11?
So I just told this story to one of my colleagues that I was working with. He's a doc. And he was telling me, he's like, when 9/11 happened, I was doing this. And I was like, that's funny you say that, because when 9/11 happened, I watched it and I saw the smoke from the towers from my elementary school. Like I was in, I think 4th grade or 5th grade. And you could see the smoke from PS 200, which is the elementary school I went to in Brooklyn. And we're like, what the hell is happening? And then it was on every TV as it's happening. And I have to sometimes pause and like go through the archives of my mind to recall what was actually happening, because I was so young. You don't really process, holy crap, what happened? But yeah.
How close? Sorry, it's nice to meet you, by the way. First off, I just want to say your beard looks just as good here as it does on Instagram. as a guy who can't, I can't. Yeah, I was like, man, is he painting that on, or what is that?
No, it
looks plush and perfectly lined up.
Thank you.
I'm jealous, but how close is Brooklyn to where the towers were?
40 minute drive.
Oh wow.
Yeah. Where I was, without traffic, you probably get there in like 35, 40 minutes.
At what point did you start thinking about nursing? How were you introduced to nursing?
It's by mistake, by accident, coincidentally, the antithesis of everything I ever wanted to be. So as you can see, I'm brown in the flesh. I come from a very molded, stereotypical background. And going to backtrack a little bit. First generation American here. First to ever go to college, graduate college, go into healthcare, get a doctorate. A lot of firsts happening here. My dad was a taxi driver, and that was really it, right? Like my dad didn't have any type of backup for us. He worked hard, very classic old school story. I'm the patriarch, I'm going to provide for you, make sure you get food and a roof over your head, but I don't really have a 401k or a retirement, and I don't know how to pay for college, but I did what I had to do as a father, and the rest is yours, right? And so that was kind of like the future that had been painted. And mind you, he worked really hard to bring us here, and provide everything that a father should. But in terms of kind of going through everything, it was a lot of figuring things out on my own. And I remember just going to community college and taking a whole bunch of random classes. Not sure. Very, very typical streamlined American process, right? Like, I don't know, I'm going to college, dude. Freaking ended up taking a speech class. I took a theater class, theater appreciation, I remember. And I was seeing plays, and I was like, what the hell am I doing? Like, what the hell am I doing? But at the same time, I was also enrolled in anatomy and microbiology, and those have a connection. And then my whole life, everybody wanted me to be a doctor. Everybody around me, friends, colleagues, their fathers, they're all doctors. And it's really true, man. In our culture, if you're not, this high achieving affluential individual who is either a lawyer, a doctor, or something that you can, brag about at some sort of gathering that you're having, you're not really respected. You're not really appreciated. You don't really account for much. That's just kind of the way the dogma has been. And I hate being a mold. I don't like fitting into a mold of anything. And I never like to be boxed in. And I remember taking an anatomy class. It was with cadavers, and we went to lab. And I remember first of all, I saw a cadaver and I freaked the hell out. And I'm like, holy crap, that's a human. I didn't know what the word cadaver meant. So it was like the second day of class, and it was lab. And I go in there, and there's 9 corpses in that room. And I was just like, oh my God, this is a person. Like, not
what were you expecting?
I don't know. I didn't know the word cadaver. I was 17 and a half, I think, at that time, or maybe 18.
Oh, yeah.
And I didn't know what the word cadaver meant. It was just anatomy with cadaver lab. That's what it said. And so the last anatomy I took in high school, we were dissecting frogs. So I was like, okay, I'll go study frogs and cats. And I remember going there, and I was awestruck. And so I went, and I just I think it was a woman. And I just held this human heart in my hand. And I was just awe-inspired. And I just looked at it. And I was like, wow. This is inside all of us. And I kind of went on this philosophical trip. And then I started thinking about racism. And I started thinking about how awful human beings are to each other. This was actually a thought that I had at that point. I remember this very vividly because it was kind of a pivotal moment for me. And I was like, wow, everything inside us looks the same. Like, this lady has a heart. I'm holding it in my hand. I can see her lungs. I can see her veins and arteries. She looked different than me. She was white, but we're all the same on the inside. So how the hell are we so awful to each other? And that was my initial thought. And I said, I love this. I really love this. I love what we are inside and out. I want to do something with this. So I became a personal trainer.
Clearly,
and I was working out at that time. I was competitively bodybuilding, and it just kind of naturally aligned. And then I had another, epiphany of a moment where I wanted to do more. And I was like, this is not enough. I'm helping people lose weight and helping them be better, but I want to do more. There's got to be more. And so somebody recommended nursing. They're like, you should think about becoming a nurse. Immediately, everybody was like, ew, nurse. Nurses back home in Pakistan, they still do what Florence Nightingale did. That's the perception. So when you say nurse, to a lot of people with the old school mindset, they think bedside care, changing diapers, giving bed baths, being a yes man, yes woman to the doctor, following orders, giving medicine. That's nurse. That's it. I was like, okay, I'll look into nursing. Looked up a program, UIC, University of Illinois. They saw their classes that they were having, did my associates or my transfer credits at a community college, transferred over to UIC, put all my eggs in one basket like a typical 18-year-old would, only applied to one school, and said it was the best school in the state, and your ego runs pretty high at that time. And if I can't get in, then I guess I don't deserve to be a nurse or go into nursing. That was the only school I applied to, got in, went to finish, and got my first job at a Cook County hospital, which is a level 1 trauma center on the west side of Chicago. And the rest is history. Worked med surg for about 8 months, got extremely bored. I needed a bigger challenge. And I went in, crossed over to trauma, became a trauma ICU resuscitation nurse. And that was probably the most gratifying job I've ever had in my life, because we literally saved lives. We saved lives for a living. And Cook County has a reputation that precedes it. And it was so hard saying goodbye and making the decision to go to CRNA school, because I found myself at the same crossroad of, I know there's more out there and I know I can do more, but leaving the comfort zone is so difficult and painful almost. And I finally arrived at the station where I was meant to be my whole life, starting 2009. Because that's when that moment happened of holding a human heart in my hand, and I ended up here. So
backing up just a little bit, because I know you said then you were working in trauma ICU, but I've seen your Instagram and I've seen you mention, failing the nursing boards a couple times. So kind of how did that go? I mean, I guess like seeing it from my perspective, I was kind of the same way. I didn't really have much. Josh's family was in nursing, so it was kind of laid out for him. But for me, I was kind of the same way. My dad, carpenter, my mom worked in a cafeteria, never really had big aspirations for college or a push to do anything really. And then I found my way into nursing and failed a class and had to repeat it, but I was able to pass the boards. But along the way, there were times when I think I was kind of like, well, maybe I'll just do something else. So what motivated you to keep going as like, people are kind of looking down on nurses and like all this other stuff you're kind of going through? What kept you going to keep trying to pass and get there?
So I've gone into detail about this because on the surface, and I have gotten so much hate. I've gotten so much hate and just judgment from people for being vocal about my failures, and which has actually prompted me to be more vocal about it, because healthcare and medicine is probably unequivocally one of the most toxic, unsafe, unrealistic, surrounded and battered up in false perception of success careers that you can ever choose.
Yeah.
On the surface, people like to portray that everybody's brilliant, they're all lifesavers, everybody's always running codes, and everyone has a really difficult shift and they come home and I was out saving lives. You were sitting at the freaking counter desk charting and just hitting copy from previous. You barely got up. Like, relax, right? But everybody apparently is the top scores. They got into residency. They got into this and that and this. Everybody got it right. Really? That's why you're going to tell me that residents, medical residents, fellows, surgeons, and docs don't have some of the leading percentages of suicide rates? Like, come on, man, what world are we living in? Like, all this stuff about mental health and self-care, which they somehow equate to shot target and not thinking about the cost-effective analysis. That's self-care? Like, is that what we reduced ourselves to? So I wanted to, first of all, eradicate and break that false narrative that people are perfect, life is a straight line, because it rarely ever is, and that you're going to mess up in life, and it's really, truly going to humble you and make you better. And so what happened with me was completely out of my control, out of circumstances, and people have to really take the time to understand that, and that's what life is about. In 2013, I was powerlifting. I had just come off of a very lucrative bodybuilding career. I was nationally competing, and I went into powerlifting. I was doing a workout. I was deadlifting 500 for multiple reps. End of a workout, I was exhausted, and I took a wrong breath. I unbraced my core, and literally during that rep, I felt a pop in my back, and immediately I knew something was wrong. Long story short, I ended up herniating L4, L5, S1. I had to go through nursing school. I finished in 2014. The pain continually got worse. I got physical therapy, didn't help. They put me on narcotics, didn't help. I got 6 epidural pain injections in the course of a year. You're only supposed to get 4. I got 6 because they got less and less and less effective. I developed scoliosis, neuropathy, and my body was in compensatory mechanism because the pain on the right was so bad, my entire spine shifted to the left. I couldn't walk straight anymore. I had to get surgery. The surgeon messed my surgery up. He failed, like the surgery failed. It was a microdiscectomy and a laminectomy. Now that we do it all the time, it's pretty straightforward. Prone case, you go in, good surgeon, hour and a half, 2 hours max, minimal bleeding. You're done. You go home, right? Lateral precautions for the day, discharge the day after. Straightforward, right? We talk about it now. He went in there, he cut me open, and he missed the disc. He missed the portion that he was supposed to take off, which was smashing the sciatic nerve. He did that, put a whole bunch of steroids in there, switched me back up, sent me back home. My pain was worse than it was before the surgery. I consulted a second surgeon, got a repeat MRI, and they said, your radiculopathy, your nerve is so badly damaged. If you do not get this surgery, you're going to lose your bowel and bladder function, and you're going to get foot drop, and you may potentially not walk again. I was 23 years old. when they told me this. I had just finished nursing school. I was on Norco, Oxy, Valium, Diazepam, and Flexeril. And I had to study for the NCLEX while that, because my life didn't stop. I was married at that time. And so I had to study while completely incapacitated. Because what am I going to say? All right, too bad. I'm on drugs. I have pain. I'm not going to study. No, I finished nursing school. I had to try it for boards. Well, you can imagine what happened. I was in so much pain. I couldn't sit straight and I was drugged up all the time. I failed my boards. I tried again. Couldn't think right. Couldn't study right. Failed my boards. I had to get my second surgery. And this time surgery was a success. I went, got the surgery, and it saved my life. Third time, not on drugs, went through physical therapy, took my boards. Lo and behold, the things you can do when you have a clear mind and you're not in the worst pain of your life and on drugs. I passed the NCLEX on the third attempt. I learned a lot about myself as a man, as a human being, as a practitioner of faith, my relationship with God, and what it means to pretty much just be resilient irrespective of life circumstances. And that was like the first trial that I really went through. It was a physical trial. It was an emotional, mental trial. And that was my NCLEX journey. And from there, man, it was just like, okay, I know the type of person that I can be because God tested me and has allowed me to see myself and my capacity. And that was the NCLEX. And then you know what? Fast forward a few years, that was just an arbitrary exam that had nothing to do with the person and the person I was going to become and the future that I was going to have. And that's what I wanted people to understand. It's really not about how you start, what happens to you in the middle, but it's who, when, how, and at what time you cross that finish line that determines the winner of the race, right? So
yeah, I remember talking to some of the other students and like them freaking out, like, oh, I don't know how I got this test coming up. And it's just like, hey man, like when you get your nursing license, it doesn't say your grade point average. It doesn't say how many things you took. You're a nurse, man. Like just like everybody else, it's like a clean slate. You're starting fresh and sky's the limit basically. So it's a cool message. And I think it's something for different reasons. Obviously yours was kind of a unique situation, but for different reasons, I feel like it is a big hurdle for a lot of nurses getting started. I mean, so I guess your message would just be like mindset and just powering through it and just finding kind of your reason for it.
Absolutely. And really just having that self-belief, right? I spent a lot of time in nature, just really reflecting. Does it rain forever? Does it snow forever? Is it sunny forever? Everything has its course. And you have to have the foresight to understand that and say, you know what? I'm just going through a really crappy period in my life right now, or this is just a hard time, but I got to grind through it. And it's just like CRNA school, Josh. Man, these 3 years really sucked. Did it last forever? No, pain rarely ever does, right? But once you can, persevere through that, then you realize, okay, every single sacrifice and every single thing that I went through, it makes sense now. But it's about that delayed gratification, that foresight to understand what it is that you want and why you're doing it. Really understand why.
The more we network and the more we meet other people who have achieved some sort of success, everybody has a story where they encountered trials and difficulties. And the pattern that I'm noticing is what people did when they encountered these situations. And when you push through, you can overcome that and achieve the success that everybody wants. But it's the people that are unable to deal with what they've been given that are not able to push through. Those are the people who are a little bit, I don't want to say they're not as successful, but I see a pattern that people who have pushed through and had extremely difficult situations, they've been able to achieve things that everybody wants to achieve.
Definitely.
So what part of that difficulty, or how do you think that has made you become a better provider and not just a better nurse, but a better provider and anesthetist? How do you think that has helped you?
I know what it's like to be on the receiving end of the care, good care and bad care. And I'll give you an example. I had a surgery yesterday, and the guy was really scared. He was like a big old dude. He was really scared. He's never had surgery before. His mom was over there. And at the same time, there's a second surgery after of an elderly lady. And I'll tell you her story first. Spanish speaking, say probably 4, creeping, dancing on 5. Cerebral, had a CVA about 5 days ago, had a cerebral infarct, F of 30, hyperlipidemia, mitral regurg, stage 3 heart failure, uncontrolled diabetes, Alzheimer's, like pretty much like every box in Epic. Okay, BMI of 40, BMI of 45. Spanish speaking only. She has to go in for a vascular case that we're doing. Okay, no, excuse me, no, it wasn't a vascular case. It was a gangrenous toe amp because it was like she was actively infected, and of course, after hours case. Her 2 daughters are there, and they only speak Spanish too. So the mom doesn't speak any English, the daughters don't speak any English, and I'm speaking to the daughters, and I'm doing consent with them. And you know, with consent, you say as much that's necessary and applicable, right? If Colin is having surgery, Colin, and you're here for a wound extraction on your buttock because you got infected because you went for, you know, a butt implant in Miami because that's what you're into. And I'm like, hey, Colin, we're going to do this. You know, Colin kind of looks like that. He's that BBL kind of guy.
I could use it.
Because Colin doesn't squat. He's like, I'd rather just get a BBL in Miami. So
I try, but hey.
So, you know, I'm like, hey, Colin, there's a chance that you might wake up, you might hear some sounds because we're doing it under MAC, right? But I'm not going to be like, hey, Colin, you might be ventilated forever. You might have a stroke and a heart attack during the surgery. He's like, bro, what? So I'm talking to these daughters, and I said, look, there's a possibility that we may have to intubate your mom because our backup is always general anesthesia. And with that comes a lot of risk. There's a possibility that she can die because there's a lot of stuff going on. And they immediately start crying because I'm speaking through a translator, and you can tell they're so attached to their mom. She's been through hell. And I put my arm on their mom's shoulder, and I said to the interpreter, as I'm staring at their mom, I said, I'm going to take care of her like she's my own mother, and I'm going to take the absolute best care of her. I promise you that. And they tell you, don't make promises to patients. No, but a promise that I could keep, because I was going to take care of her like she's my family member. And when I went in there, and when I, you know, put the mask on her, and when I was pushing the drugs, and when I was looking at her respirations and just making sure that her arms are positioned properly, every single I that I was dotting and T that I was crossing, in my mind, I was like, you made a promise to somebody's mother that you will treat their mother like your mother, so you uphold that promise in this operating room because they're not here right now. That what makes me be a better provider every single day. Because I also remember, you know, being admitted to the hospital, going to the ER in excruciating pain and just suffering and wanting to end my life. I had suicidal ideations after my first surgery because I was like, holy crap, I'm 23 and I'm going to become a cripple, right? Like, I'm not going to be able to walk again. And I was just deadlifting 500 pounds last year. Like, what the hell, my life just happened. And that empathy, man. And that's where I think personally for me, my faith plays a huge role, because as a Muslim, I understand that God created me and I'm going to return back to him. And in between that process of being created and returning back, how you live this life and how you treat other people, you're going to have to give account for. So whether Colin or Josh, you're seeing me or you're not, you're in my OR or not, I know God is watching me. And I have to be responsible and accountable for my actions. So regardless of standards of care or whatnot, I have standards set by God that I got to uphold myself. And every single day, I got to live by those standards and that criteria. And having been a patient and having gone through that myself, I have to do right by people because that's what they deserve, plain and simple.
So I saw you wrote an article on mental health and suicide prevention a few years ago. I assume that was coming from a very personal place, since you just mentioned you had some of those thoughts. What was the purpose of writing that article, and what did you want to come of it?
So I wrote two. I'm a freelance writer for nurse.org, and I've written a series of articles for them on various topics. That was while I was in trauma. And it was overlying dealing with grief and the loss of patients. And I saw so much death in the 5 years that I worked there. Young men and women, victims of tragic incidents, car crashes, house fires, gun violence, bystanders getting shot through the head while they're walking home from school. And we had to deal with that every single day, every single night. Like, that was my life. And I saw the toll that it took on some of my colleagues because they were mummy wrapping the brains of a child that resembled their child at home. And, you know, I had to do CPR on somebody that was my nephew's age and even looked like him. and then going in the closet and breaking down on the floor and weeping. Like, I went through that myself. And I'm like, if I'm going through that, I know there's other people out there that are going through that, unless they have a rock inside their chest. And then recalling back to my own personal thing, man, sometimes you get to this very low point in your life. You hit rock bottom, or you're perceived rock bottom. And it doesn't matter how strong you are physically, who you are, how accomplished you are. If this has been cracked and is no longer sound and foundational, you're going to crumble. And Anthony Bourdain, Robin Williams, Amy Winehouse, Chester from Limp Bizkit, from Linkin Park.
Oh.
These are people that we see as so accomplished and happy and on tour, and they have families. Right here, man. Right here.
Yeah.
And we ignore it, and we don't think it's important until that's it. And so going through my own thing, and the physical pain got so bad, the thoughts were like, I think it would be better if I was dead because I can't take this pain anymore. That was a physical pain. There are people that live with not just physical pain, but terminal diagnoses, that live with emotional pain, trauma, physical, sexual assault, right? Financial burdens, loss of loved ones, seeing tragedy, PTSD, war veterans. All these things are things that we can't see as human beings, but they can completely go in here and just completely obliterate a person's peace. And that is what prompted me to really just reflect on myself, what I went through, my lived reality as a trauma, and what I was seeing. I had gone through a divorce around that time in late 2015. I'm happily remarried now, 5 years going. We just celebrated our 5-year anniversary this past Saturday. But I went through a divorce at that time, and that was right after my surgeries. And so it was like physical trauma, and then came emotional, another emotional stressor. And sometimes that's all it takes to push you over the edge. That's it, man. Like, just that small little thing, and you're like, that's it. And once you've lost that hope, because hope is what allows us to get up every single day and breathe and do what we do. So that's where all of that came from. It was just a culmination of past events, present reality, and, just future thought about others that either are going to experience this or have experienced this phenomenon.
Yeah, I think especially with nursing, I mean, it's, in the medical field, you almost, it's like finding that balance between like leaning, or like, I guess, acknowledging your emotions and being able to do your job, because you do have to be able to like get through it. But it's like finding the way to like cope with that. And I don't think they do the best job of that in nursing from what I've seen. I did ER trauma, so it's like we would see, a lot of bad stuff as well. And they do a quick debrief afterwards, but it was like, yeah, I didn't feel like there was enough focus on, how's everybody doing? Are you actually okay? And trying to find that balance between, how you keep doing your job and how you actually like check in with yourself and make sure you're processing what's going on and dealing with it. So it's good. It's good to see, I think, especially for men too, in the nursing field, it's like, I think men are leaned on a lot I don't know, maybe not, but
no,
like
yes,
there's an expectation that you're supposed to be like tough and like not be affected by things. And so I do think that that's, as a guy writing that article, for me, it would be more powerful.
And I want you to continue going with where you're going, because yes, Colin, you're a guy. Josh, you're a guy. You're a CRNA now, but do you not have a family?
Right.
Do you not have a mother? Do you not have a wife that you come home to, a child that you hold in your hand? Do you not have the same organs that I do, the same mind, the same heart?
Yeah.
Do you not feel like I feel? So what about the fact that, you have different reproductive organs than else, that you're not allowed to feel, heartache and emotional breakdown and cry at the loss of life that you see in front of you? And these are just stereotypes and dogmas that have been created and even like perpetuated by society, where it disenfranchises an entire, group of people. And there's this false it's just like with women. Well, women can't do X, Y, and Z. Some cultures will say that, right? Some societies will say that. They can't be professionals. or they'll say they only deserve to be at home or only belong at home or X, Y, and Z. Says who? Like, you're just going to box them in just because they're women? Like, what?
Yeah.
So you can't do that. You can't do that. And so, man, you know how powerful it is for a man to be expressive of his emotions and actually be the man that he's supposed to be. A strong man is not one that can hide his emotions and just completely, silence himself, because what happens? It's that spring. You press and you press and you press and you press, and guess what? It's going to eventually bounce and explode, and it explodes on the wrong person. And that's when we deflect and misdirect our anger, emotion, all of this stuff that you're talking about.
And I think, what is it? I don't know the numbers, but I think it's dramatically higher rates of suicide in men than women. That's definitely something going on there. Did you, we also saw that you've gotten into motivational speaking. How long have you been doing that, and what prompted that, and what does that kind of look like for you?
That started, again, the backstory being kind of what I went through, the physical stuff, then having spent some time just piecing together my mind after going through that divorce, and then really in the nursing world, just being an observer, man, just for a few years, being this immigrant. When I came to this country, I couldn't speak English. I spent almost 2 years of my life as a mute in America because I couldn't communicate with people, right? So I did a lot of watching, observing, listening, learning, and I just reflected on my life, the education I received, the financial literacy that I had to teach myself, the discipline that I needed to have, having a father figure, but not having support from that father figure to pursue higher, education or dreams and things of that nature. I learned the power of self-efficacy and self-determination, and at the same time growing into my faith. And I say that because many of us are born into a faith, right? Your parents might be Catholic. Your parents might be Jewish. My parents were Muslim, are Muslim. And many times as a young person, you're given this faith, but you really haven't earned it. You don't really understand the pinnacles of your faith. And so the role kind of evolved because I was speaking to my life experiences. And when I began writing on social media, it just began with a post. I wrote about one of the first posts that I ever made on Instagram was my first code that I ever experienced as a nurse. It was the first code that I ever experienced as like a man, a person, a human, and as a nurse. Like, whoa. And I just kind of wrote it. And for that time, it kind of blew up. And people were like, oh, crap, I remember my time. I remember this experience. And then I realized we have a shared human experience that we can all really just connect through. Grief, happiness, joy, embarrassment, hopelessness, discipline, determination, grit, perseverance. These are all things that we all have in common, amongst many other things. And I had a lot of experiences in life that prompted me to speak to that. And so I really just spoke about some of the things that I went through, how I had my mindset and what I was doing. And as I was doing that, more things kept coming up. My ambitions going. And as my ambitions grew, the level of work and grit and work ethic that was necessary to succeed in those grew as well. And so I just spoke about that and kind of grew into a few different roles. Opportunities came. I started fundraising, speaking locally in my community, seeking religious knowledge, spending time with teachers, and giving some motivational talks to, some of the youth in the community, just to kind of keep them, their heads straight and just be a positive role model and influence to the younger generation. And started getting invited to some colleges, universities, started keynoting at some places, nursing schools, graduations, and just speaking to life's truths, the truths of life. And then getting into CRNA school, talking about trauma, the lessons that I learned about human life and the delicacy and the nature of how temporary this life is, and the intersectionality between my faith, Islam, my career and my profession as a healthcare provider, and then just a youth growing up in America, medicine, faith, and just the life as an American, at that point, teenager, young adult, and now just a full-fledged man in his 30s who's navigating life as he sees it.
And you see going forward, I know you just became a full-on CRNA, so obviously you're just getting started with that. Do you do you kind of see doing a blend of the two going forward, or do you, I mean, not that you prefer one over the other, but is there, how do you see things going for you going forward? What do you see the next 5 to 10 years looking like?
God willing, I have life. That's the first thing, because nobody's promised tomorrow. Right. And I think that's what allows us to live a fulfilled life, is having that understanding. Definitely growing into my profession and my career, learning all there is to learn, which is a very interesting statement because you'll never learn everything. But I know that the ceiling is so high. I've had some phenomenal faculty that have set the bar so high for how intelligent a person can be, how skilled a practitioner can be. And I want to see that from myself. I'm a big fan of Kobe Bryant and his work ethic and grit. You can see actually a lot of the Kobe wall art behind me.
Oh yeah.
But that's Jordan and Kobe sitting right there. That's Mamba mentality. That was him at the finals with Miami, the last buzzer beater. These are reminders, but really pushing the brims of my practice as a CRNA. That's definitely important. But in terms of what you asked, growing into the role of public speaking more, because I have life experiences, messages that many need to hear. They're simple messages, right? But people forget that. And I really simplify my writing and my message on social media as well, which is like, look, the world is ever changing. Josh, we're sitting here, you guys are, I don't even know what state you're in. You're in Wisconsin. Colin, where are you?
I'm in Los Angeles.
Right. You got a West Coast and 2 Midwesterns here talking about just talking about talks in life, right? Yeah. Simplify things. And social media sometimes complicates it. And it makes us so detached from reality. Like, life is simple. You have your life. I have mine. Live that. Don't live to please other people. In between, do as much good as you can. Don't harm other people. Don't hurt other people. And just take care of your family. That's the message. Take care of yourself. Take care of your family. Be good to human beings. And that's it. Don't live life for other people. And so growing into the role of public speaking as it comes, being involved in CRNA advocacy, I think that's really important just from a professional standpoint. This is my career now. This is my profession. I have to take ownership of it. Unfortunately, saying without saying, there are entities at play. There's a very inflammatory political culture that kind of circumvents itself around our profession. And it's necessary to not, be on the sidelines and be an active participant of the game, or the bus is going to leave without you, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. And so there's a few external endeavors that I've taken for personal growth, private classes that I've signed up for just for my own personal spiritual development, professional development, and going from there. I think it's really important to, fill in that vessel before you begin pouring, because you can't pour from an empty vessel. And from what I have observed, a lot of us constantly want to give. We want to give information. We want to try to preach and give knowledge and wisdom and expertise. And you can only do so much without really pausing, detaching, and filling yourself. So now that I'm done with CRNA school, there are many, aspects of my life that I was negligent of because my priority was linear, was one. I had to finish school. So now I got to take time to really fill my own, invest in my family, invest in myself and my growth outside of just the anesthesia aspect of things too.
Yeah, that's definitely a lot. Yeah, I mean, I like to live a day at a time, though. I mean, I think it's easy to get caught up thinking about the future and where you're going to be. But yeah, I like the idea of simplifying and just living. I
was just talking to sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say not just living for the moment, but like living in the moment, I guess.
Absolutely. I was just talking to a financial planner. That's what my meeting before I got with you. And he's talking about retirement. He's like, I see you retiring at 65 and in the year 2081. And I'm like, year 2081? Hold on. How many years is it? I'm like, dude, you're talking to me about 58 years from now? I'm like, I'm just trying to live this year to the best of my capacity and be the best human being that I can be. And of course, I'm going to plan for that because it's important. But just hearing that out loud, I'm like, wow, that's crazy. But I'm very concerned with how my life is in this present moment, with the people around me, and, what impact I'm having in the world as I exist right now. I don't know if I'm going to be alive, in 2078, what he was talking about, but I know I'm here right now, and there's a part that I have to play. And I'm just trying to, figure out what it is as I go.
So you kind of already went over a few experiences that you had as a nurse that were very rewarding to you. Do you have one specific situation that stands out in your mind that was just kind of pivotal in your career?
Yeah, there's so many, but whenever somebody asks me of that, it first one that pops up. A few years ago, there was a young boy. He had to have been 10 and maybe 12. He was going home, walking down the block to his grandma's house, and he was going to tell her he's about to graduate. He was so excited. And a stray bullet comes and shoots him in the head. He gets brought to my unit, and we try to resuscitate him. He's intubated. I'm taking care of him. I have to do constant changes to his head because brain matter continues to ooze. His mom is there, and she's at the foot of the bed. She's holding his foot, massaging it, and she's having a transactional conversation with God. She's bargaining with him, and she's telling him, baby, your mama's right here. Wake up. Come on, baby, your mama's right here. We'll do this, we'll do that. And she's talking to God, and she's talking to her child, and she's crying and weeping. And for the first time in my life, I had nothing to say. I looked at her, I placed my arm on her shoulder, and it was probably one of the most beautiful moments that I've had with a human being. And I just cried, man. I just looked at her and I just wept. I cried with her, for her. And I remember the trauma surgeon came in, the attending at that time, and she says to the mother grabs her and she says, tell me my baby's going to make it. Tell me my baby's going to make it. And she starts shaking her. And the surgeon, female, grabs the mom and she says, we've done all we can. Now we leave it in God's hands. She didn't say anything. That's it. And that was a very, very difficult moment for me, man, to just watch that human grief and to watch that mother cry and weep, but also the wisdom and foresight of this attending to know exactly what to say and not be afraid to say it and say what was necessary to be said in that time and know her limits as a human being. People are so detached from reality in healthcare. They don't know how to talk to people. They don't have the emotional intelligence to talk to grieving family members. And sometimes we forget that at the end of the day, that's a human being in front of you, not a patient, not a diagnosis, not a room number, not a surgery, not a case, a mother, a brother, a father, a husband, a sister. That's what's in front of you. That's really difficult for me. And similarly, a very similar story was there was a young man. I'll conclude with this story. He was traveling from Atlanta. I think he was visiting here. He was a young African-American man. He had converted to Islam. He was Muslim. And he was walking down the street in Chicago and somebody shot him in the back, tried to rob him. They shot him in the kidney. And so he went through, we did a thoracotomy on him, obviously had to take out the bleeding kidney. They took out his spleen. He's on pressors. He's on ventilator. Eventually he was on CVBH. And many of the nights I took care of him. He was in our unit for almost like 2.5, 3 months. And it was during the time of Ramadan when Muslims observed fasting. And so many nights I would have him. His mother would be there. She would be fasting as well. And, I would pray with her. I would pray for her. And we would talk about God and we would have this spiritual connection. So they were Black converts to Islam. And and she knew I was visibly Muslim and things like that. So we just naturally connected. And I remember one shift when I came and I got report, they told me, he had really Brady down to like 20 and they had to give him atropine and they had a crash cart outside his room. And man, whenever you come into a shift and you got a crash cart outside the room, like that's just not a good sign. Like the Reaper's there. He coded that night on my shift and he ultimately leaped away. And I remember his mom coming and she was devastated, man. She had almost lived at the hospital every night. And she had been fasting, additional after Ramadan ended, just praying for her son. When he died, she was so angry because she was in one of the stages of grief is anger. She was so angry. And she kicked everyone out of the room. She goes, just leave me with my son. And she was grieving and crying. She goes, everyone, you. And she asked me to stay and she pulled a curtain. And once again, she's standing there crying. And I'm standing over her son. I'm crying with her. And I asked her, I'm like, would you like me to pray for your son? Would you like me to pray? Because what happens for Muslims is there's a funeral prayer that happens when you're going to bury somebody, and the collective community kind of does a final prayer of forgiveness for them before they send them off, essentially, right? And they bury them. And she said, yeah. And this, at the first time ever, man, I stood at the bedside and I prayed over this deceased son of hers with her. And that perhaps was probably the best thing that I ever did as a nurse for a patient. And it had nothing to do with medicine. It had nothing to do with healthcare. But that woman needed me in that time, and she chose me over everyone else to be with her in the most painful moment of her life. And I got to pray with her for her son. And that was like, man, I have chosen my life's work. Like, there is nothing more gratifying than that. And that was one of the most special moments that I've had as a bedside nurse.
It is. Nursing is, or the whole medical field is definitely unique in that way. You're experiencing something that most other people don't. Just being so intimately involved in essentially strangers' lives and the most, like you said, the most difficult moment of her life. So that's, yeah. And to handle it in that way, obviously, makes a huge difference. Yeah. I mean, obviously that's heavy stuff, but
that was heavy, man. But that's trauma in a nutshell, right?
That's it.
You also saw a lot of miracles. You also saw a lot of lives being saved, but and that's the thing, right? Like, that's life.
Yeah.
Is that you have these highs, and then you also have these lows, and then life itself is just traversing and treading that middle ground, right? And not letting the highs consume you, and not letting the lows drown you.
Yeah.
And that's, in a nutshell, life.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well.
In closing, as one of the last questions we'll ask you, is there a single piece of advice that you've received that has benefited you more than anything else?
So, well, anesthesia, you know what? Since we're in anesthesia right now, I'll give you some anesthesia advice that I've gotten from faculty, from one of my mentors, Dr. Franklin McShane. He's faculty at my program. And he always had these profound little gems that he would put in his lectures that had nothing to do with anesthesia, right? And that's what I remembered most. And I'm like, all right, Confucius, I got you. Like, that's awesome. So he would always say, don't be a Cavalier cowboy. Like, what? Don't be a Cavalier cowboy. Meaning, don't go out swinging and doing all this crazy, funky anesthesia because you think you're some hotshot badass, because you're not. Don't be Cavalier, right? And many times people, overestimate what they can do, and they underestimate what the repercussions might be. And he always says, don't be a Cavalier cowboy. Stay within your limits and know what your limits are. And it takes a lot of, introspection to know what it is, what your limits are. And the second thing he always said was, he would say, look for the alligators now so you don't have to swim with them later. The hell does that mean? Pretty much, when you're doing anesthesia, when you're doing surgery, when you're pre-oping patients, look for all of those alligators that are going to come and bite you and consume you and eat you and kill your patients. All the disease processes, all the labs, all the interactions, whatever may be, whatever that you're going to do, whatever procedure you're going to do, look for those alligators so you don't have to swim with them later. Because the worst thing is, right? Simple, easy example. Leaky little IV, no veins at all. And you're like, I got this, man. It's okay. I got an IV. Guess what? Arms are tucked, robot, Steve Trendelenburg. You didn't look for that alligator.
It's a disaster waiting to happen.
Oh, that is a disaster. Because you better hope to God you get that EJ. Because that's all you've got going for you. Or a temp they've got a vein, something, right? Like, so that he would say that. And I like to live by that each day as a practitioner. And I'm going to share something else. I actually wrote this one down. He said, amateurs practice till they get it right. Professionals practice till they can't get it wrong. And I thought that was just fantastic. He said, amateurs practice till they get it right. Professionals practice till they can't get it wrong. And that kind of goes with that Kobe mindset is, just working to be the best every single day, better than myself until it becomes second nature. And you simply can't do it wrong because it says innate as breathing. But just general advice, man, is just believe in yourself. believe in yourself. No one's going to believe in you until you believe in yourself. Self-perception, self-actualization, self-respect. The only thing they all have in common is self. No one else, right? No one's going to give you respect until you have self-respect. No one's going to really do anything until it begins with the self. So
this has been awesome.
Appreciate
appreciate
just on a selfish level, this has been really great.
Yeah.
But
I appreciate it. Thank you.
But yeah, thanks for coming on. So just if people are looking to connect or just looking for more information about you, what's the best way for people to kind of find you and get a hold of, or maybe not get a hold of you, but at least see what you're doing?
Instagram will probably be the best outlet. I try to keep things, that Threads thing is pretty cool. That's for my musings. That's just for my writing and my thoughts, and it's a mixture of life and faith and a little bit of healthcare, trickle in thoughts that I have. So that's just for just thoughts, but primarily stuff that I do. And I do a lot of humanitarian work and causes, especially, if you guys are just aware of what's happening, the earthquake in Morocco, the floods in Libya, the fires in Algeria. I mean, Maui, there's just so much human suffering happening. So I do a lot of, philanthropic work through my social media on Instagram. So that is probably one of the best ways to connect with me with whatever I am doing, professional development, and just overall, aspects of my professional and personal development. It's going to be on Instagram.
All right. And that's Wali_Khan.
Yeah.
All right.
Because there's another Khan, so I had to throw an extra N to get that name.
Okay.
All the war heroes.
Yeah.
All the war heroes took all the other handles, so I had to go with.
You got the scraps.
I got the scraps, but you know what? It's interesting because sometimes, come on now, let's be real. Who hasn't Googled their own selves, right?
Yeah.
And I've done that as well, and I'm like, holy crap, who are all these random old people? That's not me.
Yeah.
But if you type in Wali Khan anesthesia or Wali Khan nurse, there is no other. All right. So in the respective field of where I am, that's me.
Cool.
Yeah.
It's been great talking to you guys. Thank you.